You had said that the Buddha or anyone who is enlightened, they are omniscient. That means they can see everything.
They know everything.
They know everything. Okay.
Yeah, know in the sense of maybe see something that's happening somewhere else.
But they are not able to sort of look into the future, and that sort of
No,
that is
even the future, past, present, and future.
But would that imply that then the future is already a given?
No, if you know the future doesn't mean it's already determined. Now see, no, look at it this way. No, you are going to do a PhD in Spain. How many years will you take? What will be your, I don't know if they give a rank or what sort of level of, degree you will get. And after that, what will you do? Will you do further studies, do a second PhD, or you will take a job as an academic? A lot of it depends also on your free will. You have a tendency, no doubt, because of karmic imprints, karmic merits, virtues, whatever. Omniscience simply means that if I look into the future, I know now what choice you will make. That's all. But the choice will be yours.
Sure, but then that also means that if the Buddha in this case can see what choice I will make, doesn't that mean that the future is in some ways decided? So suppose it is like, oh, tomorrow there is going to be rain, but that, I mean, if he already knows that, it means that there will be rain. So in some ways, it's already determined,
right? The problem here is because our understanding of time is very linear.
Sure.
So if we think in terms of the metaphor that is given of the river, that you can never step into the same river twice. So if you are looking at the river through a narrow slit, it's like only seeing what is happening in the present. And because you have a memory, you know the scenes that are passed through that slit. But if you are flying like an eagle above the river, and you can see the river right from its source, I'm using the river as a metaphor for time, not events, time. Then it would be something like that. It would not mean that time does not flow, that there is no concept of past, present and future, but that from the relative point of view, there is this past, present, future, and so we tie ourselves up in knots about if we could see the future, would it mean it's predetermined? But when you go fly like an eagle and there is no past, present, future in terms of time, then determined and not determined, these concepts also sort of fall apart, no?
So in that sense, you would say that everything is happening simultaneously.
Some people do say that. I mean, some Buddhist schools would look at time that way. And actually a closer metaphor would be Einstein's theory of spatial relativity. When he talks about simultaneous events, and what appears simultaneous from one frame of reference is not necessarily simultaneous from another frame of reference that is moving at a certain speed relative to the first frame of reference. So let's say that I'm going by train from Bombay to Calcutta. So I could say that I had breakfast in Bombay. Rather, sitting in the train, I could say I had breakfast at 9 o'clock and I had lunch at 12 o'clock and I had tea at 4 o'clock and so on. For a person who is that eagle point of view, is looking at the track, the train moving along a track and can see Bombay and Calcutta at the same time, might say I had breakfast in Bombay, I had a snack in Surat, I had lunch in Nagpur, and finally I had dinner in Calcutta. So a time interval can be replaced by a space interval when you are looking from a different. This is easy to understand. Now if you just interchange the word space and time, it comes to Einstein's theory of relativity, which is most difficult to understand. The two events which appear simultaneous in one frame of reference are separated by a fraction of a second, if seen from a frame of reference, which is moving with respect. So the experiment you see is something like this, that in that same train bogie, if somebody is sitting in the center of that bogie and two people, one at the front of the bogie and one at the back of the bogie, put on a flashlight simultaneously, then because it is simultaneous, the person in the middle should get that light simultaneously also. But to a person who is outside, if the train were to move closer to the speed of light, there will be a difference in the time in which the flashlight from A reaches the center and from which B receives, because A is moving away and B is moving towards the person from the outside point of view. So whether time, what is the issue of time in simultaneity, comes also from the frame of reference. And that's why we say, no, that's why the example of the river is valid. That you cannot step into the same river twice, and then for a person only looking, everything is this thing, and through a slit you are looking at one line on the river, then past, present, future makes sense. But there's nothing determined or not determined when you look at the whole river. There are a lot of good essays by Bertrand Russell on free will and determinism. So you can just look up the internet and arguments and debates with Bertrand Russell about this. I mean, you could even ask, is time travel ethical?
Yeah, I mean, the little I've read about like time travel, I mean, at least from like this Einstein's point of view, is that, I mean, the little I understand is that you could technically travel into the future, but going to the past is not possible. Which is also to do with the idea that you cannot go and change what has already, so to speak, happened, because it affects your own origin. Right? So if you are already here at this point in time, then you can't go. But you can, for example, which is the whole thing in that movie Interstellar as well, which is like the closer you are to the boundary of the black hole, you know, the slower time becomes. So a person who's far away, for her, the time would go much more faster than for some, much more slower than for someone who's at the. So that, which is kind of where I was coming for, that, because then there is this idea also of multiverses or pluriverses, where they say that, you know, which is to do with that double slit experiment, which is to say that, you know, every possibility, all probabilities exist for let's say, matter to be at a certain.
Yeah, so it's like somebody who is composing Sudoku puzzles for the newspaper. Now, there are those number of squares and numbers from 0 to 9, digits from 0 to 9 or 1 to 9. So, there is a limited, finite number of computations and permutations about how many Sudoku puzzles you can have if there is that many number of squares and you are dealing with numbers from 1 to 9. So if a newspaper publishes a new Sudoku puzzle every day, after a certain number of million days, according to that mathematical calculation, you will exhaust your new Sudoku. So after that many million days, you will have to reprint one of the old ones. So this is how they explain even multiverses, that the number of elements in the universe is finite, the number of atoms is finite, and everything created through the combination of atoms, through molecules to higher substances, is limited. So after they have exhausted all that, if there is to be one more combination, it will have to be a repetition of some other universe or the first universe. And since we are talking now not of just one sort of, you know, there is infinite, eternal, so to say, from the back, from the past till today. So how many times the universe would have been reproduced? Just as the newspaper would have to reproduce the Sudoku puzzle after that many 1,000,000 days. So that's why it's, you know, Anyway, so this is good. And I haven't seen Interstellar, but I've seen those 3-part Back to the Future. I don't know. That's really.
But you must watch Interstellar.
I will watch it. I have it on Netflix, I think. Yeah, or Prime Video, one of them.
It's a good film.
Yeah.
But it's, I mean, at least for me, I watched it almost 3 times to really understand sort of the philosophical
okay.
aspects of it. Because the math obviously is slightly more intelligible, but you know, the idea of meaning behind here, then and so some other places, all of that, that's quite interesting.
So it's a coincidence we are talking of this because the prize for physics, one of them is Roger Penrose, who discovered the black hole. I mean, who proved mathematically the existence of black holes.
Yeah.
And again about consciousness, there are 2 books by him. Of course, there are more books after that, but his first was The Emperor's New Mind, and the other is Shadows of the Mind, Sir Roger Penrose. Shadows of the Mind is half the latter part of the book is completely mathematical. So unless you have at least an MSc in mathematics, you may not be able to follow it. But the first few chapters are very interesting about whether, for instance, you can actually have a computer emulating human consciousness. To debate whether consciousness is separate from the brain, arises from the brain, and so on. And therefore, if it has some existence other than from the brain, when the brain is destroyed, will consciousness continue? So if a computer is exactly like the human mind, then if you could prove that first, you could see whether when you destroy the computer, the consciousness that rises from it remains.